And just for our audience, that black screen, it's actually Mr. Cisco Vicente. He's hiding.
How are you guys doing? Pleasure to meet everyone, and thank you for the opportunity here.
Thank you, sir.
Well, let's go ahead and begin. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. Welcome to episode number 5 of season 2 of CSA. Today's focus is fast past automation with CSA. We have an astute panel of CSA experts that are going to talk about their experiences with CSA. So as we go along, please ask questions. We are not going to bore you with slides today. What we are going to do is have a very riveting discussion with our astute panelists today, and Khaled's going to moderate that. Also want to thank Cisco Vicente from the FDA for being a special guest appearance today during today's broadcast, so thank you. All right, I'm going to do quick introductions, and we're going to jump right into today's riveting CSA discussion. First off, I have Joanne Goldberg from Medtronic. She is a Senior Principal Quality Systems Specialist, as well as Quality and Compliance. Joanne, welcome today.
Thank you.
We also have Louie. Louie, Senior Director, Quality, Regulatory, and Compliance from Abbott. Louie, welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Lou, IT Director of Quality and R&D Systems with Lantheus Medical Imaging. Lou, how are you, sir?
Doing great, thanks.
Awesome. And then Khaled from our Variant Compliance Group, Executive Vice President, is going to moderate today's discussion. And we also have a special guest appearance from Cisco Vicente. Without further ado, Khaled, the floor is now yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Special thanks, of course, to Cisco to join us. He has some family matter, but guess what? He still joined us. So I really appreciate his continued support. As I call him, he's the godfather of CSA. All right, so this is the team that you're looking at that had been working very hard, and I always like to present this slide to show gratitude to all the industry practitioner who's been really working hard on coming up with ideas on how to streamline not only just the CSV validation process. We have a lot of discussions around equipment, lab systems, etc. How can we make things better, simpler, and digitize and move into the automation? Okay, so again, thanks to everyone. Really what I would like to kick it off here is to have Cisco just share with us the FDA view of automation, as this is really what we want to talk about. This is the how CSA kind of was born, right? Every executive in every organization, always within the IT organization, try to avoid digitizing business process. Why? They're afraid of validation. Validation is going to make my life miserable. You know, the added tax, like my friend Jason Spiegel says. Again, what we're trying to do is to make it simpler for the IT organization so they can go ahead and innovate. That's what we need them to do. And from a quality and compliance, we want to support them. This is really how I look at it. From quality and compliance, the attorney for the IT folks. So Cisco, hopefully still on. I don't see your screen, but hopefully you can still hear us.
And remember, this is a break. If you all can just monitor your own audio.
Okay. Chris, is that you? Are we having issues here?
No, it might have been.
All right. Is that better?
Oh,
Yes,
there we
yes.
Go ahead, Cisco.
Me in my area, trying to get rid of some background noise here. All right. So my apologies. Hey, how's it going, Khaled?
Thank you, sir. No problem. Yeah, just really the couple of slides on the FDA views for automation and why the FDA supports and encourages the use of automation.
So I think, you know, I like the idea that this is being conveyed here a little bit appropriately. It's just something we've been trying to get the message out for a long time now, because we heard feedback that, you know, just from an industry standpoint, FDA was not really supportive of it. You know, everybody kind of likes their papers, their documents on their end. But the reality of the matter is this has been a push that we've been trying for a while, and a lot of the foundations for why we are working on these CSA efforts. With regards to the automation push, this has become not just a more significant FDA focus, especially in light of the COVID pandemic. It's actually a broader agency focus. It's a national focus now, right? How do we build up and bring in more of the technology, the capability for use across all of the industries in the US? I think there was a highlighted need. So this has become an idea and a principle that has been further embraced, and there'll be a lot more action on moving forward. Next slide on that.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think this leads back to, I think, the discussions that we'll probably go through in the course of even today's presentation, and we've been trying to get the idea across for a while now, right? When we talk about CSA, when we talk about even the validation requirements, I think for a long time we've never been very clear about what it is that we're focusing on and what we care for. We've never really conveyed and articulated the fact that yes, a risk-based approach is acceptable, right? The scaling, the effort and work that is performed when bringing in these technologies, these systems, especially as the systems are evolving and becoming more, cloud-based or service-based. We need to look at things a little bit differently and keep pace and be as agile as we can about that. So the idea of resetting and rethinking about the risk-based approach and providing some clarity around what we consider areas of risk to help really drive some of the thinking and what is the appropriate way to address any of the concerns is foundational to what the CSA effort is trying to drive. And I think what these cover here, I'm not going to go through them all individually, but you'll see it's just areas I think where the FDA is trying to be clear on. Here are places where we know when you're applying some kind of technology automation may have, again, let's go with the idea, may have a likelihood of risk, right? Doesn't mean that it will. So always factor that into the idea, but it does provide some clarity on if things aren't in this bucket, a lot of what the organizations do and what you're doing already sufficiently to make sure that that software is working for you is probably sufficient from a regulatory validation standpoint. And that's what we've been trying to convey. And these are, just an attempt to be a bit more, it's not necessarily prescriptive, but just a little clearer on our thinking about where we see risk introduced that could impact the patient on the road.
Well said. This is a very sensitive topic, by the way. We've been getting a lot of questions around it, and I see Louie smiling. I think just heads up, the next webinar will be totally about risk management process. And the reason being, we still, till today's date, find organizations applying risk to computer system as we apply it to product or product software for that matter. So I think that would be a very meaty discussion, hopefully for next time, Cisco. Thank you for talking about this. Awesome, great. Any comment from the team on this slide? You can feel free.
Easier said than done. It's easier said than done.
I agree. I agree. All right, sounds good. Thank you, Cisco. So what I really want to highlight now is our new member on the FICSA team, Louie Royale. Louie, I know you've been around for many, many years. You started in the compliance world, you went into the application support, and you're back. I don't know why you're back to the quality compliance, but you must love quality and compliance, or you like pain, but that's great. Can you just share with us, what have you done previously, in the CSV? How did you feel about computer system validation in your entire career? And also the next question is, how, what intrigued you about CSA? And now you're moving forward, applying it in Abbott and implementing it in Abbott, and you're going full,
yes.
Full stop. So to you, sir.
First of all, thank you for the invite. And I think this is a topic that I have a lot of passion for. And my passion was developed just based on my previous experiences and where I had to deliver from different aspects of the organization. I did start more on the project management side, moved into quality, back into more doing application delivery, back into quality again, and actually previous to my current role, I was doing application run support. So as I was kind of moving through the journey, through different roles within the organization, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what quality is all about. And a lot of organizations, they somehow they look at validation as something that's negative. And I think that's what I like about the CSA. It's trying to go after that directly and saying, let's focus on the things that add value to the organization. Let's focus on the quality of the applications and the performance of the applications. Let's apply that critical thinking. How can we, take an application, an ERP that is so large and complicated, but not have to spend, a year or two trying to validate every single aspect of it. So the beauty of the CSA, and that's kind of why I'm really enjoying this, and the CSA itself is, let's take an ERP system and let's see what are the critical components of that system. How do we treat that differently from the rest of the applications? One size does not fit all. We don't have to treat every function and every module exactly the same. So applying that critical thinking, applying the right measure of risk, and then the right level of documentation, so we're not focusing so much on the documentation itself. The other aspect to this, in my previous role as in application run support, a lot of times we need to react to the business need. We need to move fast, okay? The business is moving very fast, and we have to move as fast. Even we have to be a step ahead of them to add value to the organization. So a lot of times we see ourselves getting tangled into the processes and into the documentation and so on, and not really taking a step back and seeing what makes sense and how we need to do this. So, Cisco talked a little bit about automation, and how the FDA is really promoting and endorsing automation. And Khaled, you made that comment about there's a lot of fear, in the industry that, oh, if I do automation, then I'm out of compliance, or if I do automation, then I have to validate my automated testing tool and every report that comes out of it, and I have to, apply every risk possible, to be able to use it. And so many organizations, they tended to kind of shy away, from automation, at least on the GXP side, right? So that basically collectively, that's kind of, I'm really working hard on kind of promoting what the FDA is promoting, really the applying risk-based approach and promoting automation, injecting automation into the process, agility, the flexibility, the critical thinking to really add value. And at the end of the day, what the end customer cares about is, do I have a product that works? And if it's working as intended and it meets regulatory compliance, that's what we need. It's not how many volumes of documentation that we have produced to get to this end product. So.
Thank you. This is great. I know you mentioned this is what the FDA is moving to, but this is where also I want to make it clear to our audience that GAMP is also endorsing CSA and moving forward with it. And actually, GAMP is ahead of the game a little bit. Sorry, FDA, but that's okay. We'll move on. Joanne, almost the same questions. Again, I really wanted to welcome you to the FICSA team. You've been adding tremendous value, and love the chats we had about cybersecurity and secure by design, etc., which is really all ideas that we want to bring to our audience as well. So again, your thoughts about CSA and how Medtronic, I know you've been there for a while, you've been part of the CSA implementation, yes, you're new to the FICSA team. However, you've been applying CSA for a while when Lou was working at Medtronic back in the day. So please share with us something, and then we'll jump back to Louie. I'm sorry, Lou. You're on mute.
Thank you so much for including me in this panel. I really appreciate the opportunity. One advantage that we had at Medtronic compared to some of our partners on the team, I know that we didn't have a challenge of convincing our management that this was the right direction. They embraced it early on. So I feel very fortunate to be in an organization that understands the benefits of this and has been completely supportive of it. We've had a little bit of a challenge in helping teams to shift. We have teams that have been supporting systems for literally decades, and they had been very steeped in very thick sets of documentation and very manual processes. And working with teams to change some of their practices has been challenging, but also very rewarding, because, you know, one at a time we can help them see the advantages of putting their time, just as Louie said, putting the time in the right place, not the time in creating the documentation, not the time in applying exactly the same strategy across every system and every function, but putting the time into doing that critical thinking, and then spending your energy on what's going to reduce the most risk.
So interesting, you mentioned obviously some challenges. Can you share some of the biggest challenges, right? Just helping others understand what it is and how you did it. How did you help from your role?
Sure. So for me, one of the things that I've done a lot of is work individually with teams as they tried to make the transition, looking at what their practices had been and what changes might be appropriate. And really, we started with their previous risk analysis of the system and challenged them to say, do the risks that you've categorized really line up with just exactly this information you're showing on the screen right now? Are the things that we're considering high risk, are they really high risk for impacting device quality and device safety? And what I found is that in some cases, the teams were hesitant to lower their risk ratings. I'm not sure if it was a perception that, you know, your system wouldn't be considered valuable if it wasn't high risk, or if it's just that we're very risk averse people because we've spent so many years having to defend records, and we've in many cases adopted the attitude that more is better, more reduces risk. When I think those of us who've been making the transition to CSA realize that more time, more testing, more documentation does not reduce the risk, but what reduces the risk is the critical thinking that goes into what are the functions, what are the features that could have this impact on device quality and patient safety, and making sure that we have more effort and a very structured way of addressing those risks.
I have a follow-up question, but I'm going to hold on to it because that's a very heavy one and a very sensitive one. So I'll keep it, but I want to hear from Lou. Thank you, Joanne. Just Lou, from again your experience back in Medtronic and now with Lantheus. Just give us really what I want to hear. You've seen two cultures, right? And we know culture, organizational change management is the biggest issue here. Doing this for any change, right? Specifically this change. So just share with us some of your first impression, right, when you were talked to about CSA and how you actually did it. And I would like to hear some pros and cons, because what you did was a little bit above and beyond in terms not only CSA, but you went into automation. You build that into an automated ALM tool. So just share with us some of these experience. I know it's going to be valuable for the
Sure. Well, thanks again, Callie, for having me. But yeah, absolutely, culture for me, particularly here at Lantheus, I had an example where we happened to be running 2 major projects at the same time. And although our CSV methodology that we use, oh, pardon me, that's not going to stop, that we use really has the flexibility in it. However, it has nothing to do with the methodology so much as the person within the quality organization and how they interpret. So in one project, we had a very conservative approach, conservative with documentation, with validation. And then the other one, we had more of an open discussion. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about the 2 and what was that difference. So within one of the projects, there was an idea that, okay, we need to do a risk assessment. So we spent literally hundreds of man hours executing the business, the technical, and the compliance risk. And after hundreds of hours, we had 100% high risk for every requirement. Couldn't get away from it. It was very difficult. There was a lot of time. So what in the outcome is, well, you test everything. And we really end up, missing critical areas where we all knew there was high risk, where around we were building custom integrations. And so that got less attention than it should have. But we did develop, over 700 documents, over 25,000 pages of validation documentation. And the other project, which was a LIMS installation, high risk installation, we really took a different approach and said, okay, what does the project need? What does the project need to do? And then we really leveraged the vendor documentation that came with it. Where on the other project, we chose not to. We had a vendor come in and they were going to do the validation. And really we saw significant, when push came to shove, over $350,000 more to validate one system over the next with the same amount of requirements. So fundamentally, it was really just an approach. And to start, it doesn't start with, hey, let's automate the process, everybody will be awesome. It doesn't work that way. It's really around what Joanna was talking about, having those individual conversations, finding someone who's a thinker and say, okay, let's apply this here, let's try it. And really it was a simple approach. One is, from a conservative effect, is here's what you have to do to validate, and this is what you're going to do. The other approach was very simple. What does the project need to be successful, and how do we validate it? And those were very simple things, but it really had enormous impact to the outcome of that. And it's really around that culture. Then you could say, okay, let's automate, let's build in that flexibility, let's bring in a tool to do this for us, particularly around, testing and requirements. But if you don't have the culture, or at least a portion of the culture, behind you, it's going to be a very difficult road, right? And once those 2 projects were done, I was able to really compare them. I was able to put factual dollars and cents and time to them, and then push that up into the leadership, who said, wow, why are we spending all this money and not getting any value for it? So that's really kind of a backward approach, right? It's first figure out what you want to do and then go to automation. Automation is just not going to solve it if the culture's not on board. A tool just mimics, right, a process. So if you have a bad process, it's just going to mimic a bad process.
100%. I know that Cisco will have to drop off, but remember that question I wanted to delay a little bit? I'm going to have to ask it now. So, Cisco, hopefully I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but tell me, please, what is your thought about applying FMEA to computer system validation? And again, for non-product, please share your thoughts.
Okay, so can you guys still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Let me just make sure that we're clear on this piece. And I think, you know, I like that Lou brought it to the fact that if you've got a bad process, you know, automation is just going to make it worse. It just makes things, exacerbates things quite a bit. FMEA is a great tool, right, for its intended purpose, right? For what it's intended to do. You know, you're looking at managing and understanding and capturing, you know, all the elements of, you know, what failures could result in your product, the device from process design standpoint, so on and so forth. Great, it's got its role and purpose. It can be overused, right? And in the case, especially with some of these tools, again, I'm not going to say, hey, if it's worth in your process, that's what you want to do, okay. It's not what we're looking to drive, right? This is going to be, I think, quite a bit of overkill, I think, applied to these products, these situations, right? The idea of understanding the process risk, that was already done when you decided to build the product and have a product out there. You know, we're not asking and looking for you to take and apply a full FMEA approach to the software now being applied to that process, or the automation that's being applied to the process piece. You know, the intent and goal behind a lot of what we're looking to do and the work that we're trying to articulate in the guidance draft is to start to break that blending out that's been going on quite a bit, so that you know, people really truly focus on what happens should this software fail, right? The impact is usually, is it a process risk issue? Is it truly a device risk issue? And a lot of that work has already been done in your FMEA for the product. Don't go back and revisit that. You're just looking to understand, you know, does this failure of the software contribute to that event happening down the road? It's not go back and redo a full FMEA here. Again, not saying, you know, what you should do for your process. If it works for you and that's how it's built into your system, good. I guess that's functional, and I'm not going to speak otherwise, but don't think that that's the expectation that we're looking to drive here. That isn't what the intent is. This should be something that's a lot simpler, a lot easier, a lot more agile for your consideration and how to think through things on that end. My 2 cents on that, but if anybody else has got any other thoughts or questions, I'd be open to listening to them or hearing them later.
Can folks hear me?
Awesome. Thank you. I know you need to drop off, and I promise if we get any questions from the audience, we'll go ahead and send them to you. So thank you, sir, again for joining us, and much appreciated. Please take care of your family situation, and that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and I appreciate that. And yes, if there's any other questions on the road, you guys always know how to reach out to me, and people can find me somewhere.
Thanks, Fiscal.
Yeah, you're the godfather. Everyone knows where you are.
Okay, then.
Take care. Thank you. So Joanne, I'm coming back to you. So yes, did Medtronic move away from the classic FMEA to CSA risk-based approach?
For the non-product software, yes. And just as Cisco described, very much bringing the conversation to what is the purpose of this system, looking, you know, starting with intended use and then asking our business partners, if it didn't do that thing that you're asking it to do, what would the impact be to you? And not all requirements of the system have the same impact. And so really elevating the discussion to module by module, function by function, which are the ones that if that wasn't working as you expected it to, what would the impact be? And it changes the conversation, and finding extreme examples within one system really has helped us to have that conversation with teams. Not all features are equivalent in their impact on risk. And so starting sometimes with the extremes then helps people work through some of the medium cases and understand, well, is this more or less than that one? But again, I think it's really been embraced by our team and our management. And it's difficult sometimes for some of the engineering teams that are used to FMEA with product to make that shift when it comes to systems. But the ones who've done it, I think they see the big benefit to it.
Now, was it efficient, the fact that you kind of dropped the FMEA for non-product software? Was it efficient? Did it give you, I mean, did you see better result or kind of the same result that you would have had with FMEA?
I think that what happened before is we had many test cases for some of our systems that had been run release after release after release. We just run through this whole battery of tests. We never get failures in any of those tests, but we keep running them year after year after year because we've defined them. They're approved test scripts, and we just plan the release is going to take this many hours to run through these scripts. And then at the end, the team thinks, well, we've done the validation activities that are required for this release, so we're confident. Not that it helped them find bugs before they released them to the system, not that it was helping the quality of the system, but they felt confident that they had done what they were required to do. And so I think this really allowed us to say, well, wait a minute, if why are you running those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of test cases? They're not helping you improve the quality of the system. And if that isn't required from a regulatory standpoint to be in compliance, then why are you doing them?
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I see definitely Lou nodding. He's approving. Are you applying the same thing at Lantheus these days?
Sure, absolutely. For us, it's and that was the point, right? So at the end, if you're not making the system better, what am I getting less defects when I roll it out to my users? Can I cut my hypercare? What value are you bringing? And then if you can't apply a value to the testing or the work or the validation, then it's, you should just don't do it. It doesn't need to be done as long as you can feel comfortable that you're in control of the system, that it works as you want it to work. You can really get by and make a very defendable end result. And I think once some quality folks or IT folks, or I have it on both sides, right? So there's conservative culture both in IT and in quality. It's not always just quality. It's just, to Joanne's point, they've been doing it forever, right? I've got to be doing the right thing because this is how I've done it for 10 years. So you just got to start to break down those barriers, and you have little battles, and you kind of move them over, one baby step at a time, right?
Thank you. Lou, I'm not going to ask you that because we know you're in the process of implementing CSA, but historically, I know in your previous organizations, did you apply only FMEA? Did you apply different type of risk? Because I know we talk about FMEA as the only tool. There's tons of tools out there, right, to really analyze risk. So what else have you used, and what is your plan in terms of your organization as you're applying? Besides Khaled is helping you out here, but I don't know if that's going to help. What's your thought? Just share with us some of your previous.
Sure. So for me, at my previous organization, we did not use FMEA, but we used our own kind of, if you want to say, process that we defined internally for defining risk and risk approach and so on. So obviously, it was definitely based on industry best practices and so on. We were mostly non-product software, so that was kind of the reasoning, and it kind of worked fine for us. I want to highlight one thing. I think it's using the tool is just kind of an outcome, but I think it's taking a step back. It's what's the objective, right? The objective is that you want to be able to eliminate waste. You want to be able to be agile. You want to provide flexibility. You want to focus on the things that add value, because ultimately you want to deliver a product, a solution, a system application that is high performing, that it meets the business needs, intended use, etc., and it works. Okay, because if you say I used FMEA or I used Khaled's tool or Louie's tool, at the end of the day, if the product is not working, it's not working, you know, or the application. I mean, that's really it. So, and so we want to make sure now, you know, at Abbott, the journey, as I call it, is to make sure that we are getting together. Yes, we are using a compliance group, and I'll say that as, you know, we've done a phase 1, which is the analysis of the current state and what SLC and quality management system procedures that we have and templates and so on. And now we're in the phase 2, which is to really start to implement CSA within our quality management system and the CSA principles. When it comes to risk, we have a workshop that's coming up that we want to sit down, and I have invited some key stakeholders. The quality organization has been has been a great partner working with us, and I think, you know, that's something that it's worth mentioning, that to be successful, you need the two ends to kind of work together. You need the IT and the practitioners, and you need the quality organization to basically sit down and have good, productive, effective conversation. And, you know, luckily for us, we have that partnership in place. Now we need to sit down and look at FMEA, or even look at risk and how we want to assess risk, and decide and determine what would be the right tool to use for Abbott, for that meets our needs, our environment, and so on. Okay. Again, the objective is we want to be able to. IT is moving so fast. The business has high demands. Okay. Yeah. We cannot be, regardless of the tool that we pick, we cannot be spending months on assessing risk and still doing the same level of validation, same level of documentation. I don't want this to be a checkbox exercise. I don't want this to be just a documentation exercise to say we did it. I want to make sure that once we implement a risk-based approach, we are able to use that outcome to tailor the level of validation, the documentation, and the testing that we do. And I think one thing that we haven't mentioned, which is scripted versus unscripted testing. And I think, again, to be clear to the audience, unscripted does not mean not documented. It's still documented, okay? But it's not to the level of a scripted, you know, in the sense of a step-by-step, a screenshot every single step and so on, okay? And be able to give ourselves credit for the work that we've done. So kind of shifting left, okay? A lot of work is done by the developers. A lot of work, I used to do application support. I used to do application development. I know the team, the developers and so on, they do a lot of great work, okay? How can we take advantage of that and take credit for that work that we've done to really reduce the work downstream and eliminate errors, eliminate defects downstream, right? So that's kind of the approach that we're taking. That's the philosophy. And again, keeping the big objective in mind, which is delivering high-performing quality solutions that work, that meet the intended use to our end users.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And really, I think you're in a great position. The fact that you've got the support of the FICSA team around you, and I know the discussions that come up, it really helps, you know, confirm certain things that we're talking about. And we're not really talking about here's what the guidance of CSA says. Here's what really best practices tells us to do. So no, I really appreciate that. I want to kind of switch a little bit to both, actually, Joanne and Lou, to really talk about, you know, the value that they really got out of implementing CSA, then automating the ALM solution, which I think at the end of the day, eliminating tons of papers, not only saving trees, but saving $ and time where people can actually do more important things. And this is Khaled's speech or preach. But I want to see, you know, how you, and I think, Louie, you talked about it a little bit. You got to fix the process first and then you automate it. But can you just share with us the value, like from a speed, time, cost, etc.?
Sure. So, you know, fundamentally, one of the advantages for automation is one of the things I see in all the companies I work for is users who are kind of held responsible for validation and executing. They're like, well, what do I do? You know, so automation can really help them keep it simple, right? Do A, will tell you to do B, and C will appear, right? If you can automate to a way that its primary focus or its number one goal is to make it easy to adopt, then you've really gone a long way in helping folks apply some critical thinking. And that's one of the challenges, right? So what's nice about the very rigid method is there's not a lot of thinking to involve. I just test everything. I don't have to think about it. Your end result, unfortunately, is you're building a lot of dinosaurs, right? So these things go live and then you can't change them. But if you make a process that's simple to understand, that has a lot of layers, a lot of steps, I found that the users can comprehend, and then they can think of things themselves and start to apply some critical thinking. That's really what automation does. It makes it, you know, simple. They can apply it. They can apply it in different situations. Not everything is the same. And then they can get some benefit out of the automation and really apply it. That's what I found.
If I can add to that, I agree with that entirely. We had a lot of years, a lot of systems where we were doing the documentation manually. And I mean, I can remember back when, you know, people had bookshelves of, this was the set of documentation for this system. You know, I mean, everybody who worked on a system had bookshelves full of that kind of work. And what ended up happening is people spent so much time creating that documentation. There was no time left in the process for that critical thinking that we want them to do. Because those manual processes are just prone to error. So we just have a fleet of people who spend time reading documents just for consistency, not to make sure that what's in there is really helping the team manage the system. And so when the automation removes the burden of double checking and triple checking and quadruple checking, because the process doesn't let you go forward if you haven't completed those forms, then you can stop wasting time on that, and you can go back to having those discussions that Louie was talking about. You know, asking your process specialist, your IT technologist, you know, what is it about this system that has more risk? What is it about this change we're making that we need to address and make sure we're accounting for? But when everybody is so focused on just making sure that documents are all in the drawer, you run out of time and you run out of energy, and you miss the importance of the work.
Yeah. Let me just add a little bit to that. So just take the two examples I talked about, the two projects. One of the projects had 66 discrepancies, right? All of which, except for one, were GDP errors, right? Because they're piling the documentation. The other project had 2 because they were real defects, right? Because we weren't focused on the documentation of it, but really the critical areas that we wanted to concentrate. And then it's this really bad cycle of documentation upon more documentation upon more documentation that generates, God forgive, a kappa. And, then it's years of documentation in some cases, right? So and again, you're not bringing a heck of a lot of value to your organization when you do that.
Right. You stymie innovation, right? We don't want to make the change because it's too burdensome to make the change.
I don't want
You
to
don't
buy
want-
this software because it's too hard to validate. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I do want to take exactly maybe 2 to 3 minutes from both Lou and Joanne to what would be your advice to Louie that he's going through implementation of CSA to help him with roadblocks, challenges. You've got only 3 minutes, and the reason why, because I'm going to give 10 minutes to the audience to ask questions, because we're getting a bunch of questions, and I want to make sure I want to ask you those questions. So you've got 3 minutes. Go.
So
Go ahead,
I
Lou. Go
won't
for
need
it.
3 minutes. Yeah, I won't need 3 minutes. So really, it's around building those relationships and partnerships, right? I've been in organizations where I tried to make change and it was adversarial. That just is not going to work. If you're not collecting, some folks, some are harder to convince than others, but start to, gain that point of view, that the idea that it works, apply it in small areas, and then just build that consistency, and that, then the culture will start to slowly change, and you'll be able to do more and more, get more and more freedom. But do it in a way that's a positive partnerships.
Great.
Give chocolate.
Same message. You build trust by understanding the challenges that team is facing, one team at a time, and you'll get a groundswell because you'll have helped people and they become your best advocates.
Yep.
I fully
And
agree.
my advice is buy chocolate. Just give chocolate left and right. Coupons. All right, sounds great. So I do have a bunch of questions here that I'm gonna send over your way, and whoever feels they can answer, please jump to it. From Kareem, what are your thoughts on leveraging supplier validation efforts? Very solid and good one. Anyone would like to answer that?
Sure, I can give it a thought. So, that's your easiest avenue to reduce your in-house paperwork. These softwares that we're getting off the shelf, these are mature typically. If it's a mature vendor, they're going to have a good set. Leverage it as much as you can. Keep your focus on what's valuable around the PQ area or user testing, where it really testing your process. Get away from core functionality. There's no value there. The fact that a file, you can hit file save and it saves, really, do we really need to test that anymore?
Yeah.
Right.
Same.
Fully agree. Again, that's why we, in some cases, we do vendor audits, is to go out and verify, or even do a desk audit, verify that they have the right controls in place, documentation, etc. And Lou, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is why would I want to do another functional testing of an off-the-shelf tool that's already been tested by the vendor and many other companies that are already using it in the industry? So focus on use case scenarios and intended use and just the PQ aspect of it. And I believe that should be sufficient.
Love it. All right, from Stephen, to Louie's comment for automation, what is the justification for testing an automation tool every time you run a report? So what is the justification for testing an automation tool every time you run a report?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
reporting, you're reporting out of your system. Those are very high level, easy user tests, right? You're not going to impact functionality because you're just pulling data out. You just want to make sure you do at some level of PQ to say, does this test or this report produce what I want? And is it repeatable? And then you're done. I wouldn't go back and revalidate other portions, or stay focused to exactly what you're changing, especially reporting, because reporting is a big one. Sometimes you can even proceduralize it to create new reports that become really easy to do if you're doing a lot of reporting.
Yeah, so maybe let me, based on Lou's response, maybe I can add a bit here as well. Automated testing, you want to use automated testing where it makes sense. It's like everything else. You don't, when you go into the journey of automation, you just don't automate everything. If I have a standard report You know, I may choose to just run a couple of manual scripts and be done, because that report is just once and done. But it's really, at least in my experience, we focused on, if I'm doing a global ERP implementation, I'm automating the core functionality of that system. And then as we are rolling that system out to globally, from country to country, et cetera, and we have some local customizations, country level customization, then we're focusing the testing on those, you know. But when we do regression testing, the last thing you want to do is do manual testing and regression testing of the entire core of that application. So the biggest value for your automation comes when you have those large applications that you're doing some
enhancements,
upgrades and updates frequently, and you don't want to go back to the core functions and have to redo everything manually and spend months of validation.
Yeah. All right. Question: how is or how CSA is different from CSV? Is there any guidance document from the US FDA? Is CSA concept are acceptable from EMEA and MHRA? So we've heard those questions, and I'd like to repeat them again, and I'll answer some of them, but I'll let you actually answer them because you guys are implementers. So how is CSA is different from CSV? Anybody can take it.
Go ahead, Joanne. I'm not touching this one.
I think the traditional approach is more along the validation lines. Every single requirement must have the same level of documentation to support it. And we were I think we thought that inspectors and auditors were looking across the board and saying, well, why don't you have that level of evidence for this test? There must be something wrong. And I think that the assurance is reflecting that our approach is based on risk, and we make it very clear that we don't take the exact same approach across the board. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would say is the difference between assurance and validation.
Yeah, and again, I think if you look at CSV, every company has their own flavor of that. Usually it's a 40-part SOP with all kinds of forms and templates, and a lot, and then at the end there's usually a picture. Oh, here's how you do Agile, here's how you do Spiral. But really CSA is taking that CSV that you commonly have, and how do you apply what you have? Does it alter it? Does it just augment it? And then change your internal CSV ultimately so that you can allow this flexibility and critical thinking into the process.
Yeah. There's another question about critical thinking. There is really no tools for critical thinking. It just you apply experience and you think outside the box and you apply things. And also my response to CSA versus CSV, there is really no migration from one process to another, right? We just need to make that loud and clear. There is no migration. There may be a transition, right, or adjustment to your current CSV process. Sure. But we need the only reason the FICSA team and worked together with the FDA and came up with that computer software assurance. Let's apply assurance to non-product software, just to alleviate that validation is for product and product software and software as a medical device. But for non-product software, enterprise systems, etc., apply assurance.
Yeah, and there's one point there that popped in my head that's been working is that, I've seen lots of assessments, and if you want to encourage critical thinking, you put out a list of questions, right? But a lot of these questions I see are very well in section 5.2 of the FDA guidance. It's blah, 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 blah. Really figure out how to ask questions that people who are reading them can answer from an IT perspective. Is your system building the product? Is your system, right? Just keep those questions simple, and then you'll encourage critical thinking because they can answer it without being, completely an expert on all of the guidance that's out there, because the minute they try to interpret that, you've gone. You're gone. Keep it simple in layman terms. That's when you encourage critical thinking.
I think what we also, the biggest one we talked about is the mind shift. You know, how the way you think and apply it, as Louie just said. It's you know, when you say what is the difference between CSV and CSA, it's not that you are going to see a textbook that says CSA and a textbook that says CSV. I think it's just more of that's how I see it as well within my organization, is how we, you know, when you apply critical thinking, when you apply risk, your ability to take a step back and say, yeah, okay, we should be able to accept unscripted testing, you know, for example, right? Where in CSV, everyone is more about everything has to be scripted. I need to see all the screen prints and everything has to be signed and documented step by step. And if the script, I mean, the old thinking, if the script is not detailed enough that a 5-year-old can execute it, then it's a bad script, right? So now the idea under CSA of, no, we can leverage, you know, the unscripted tests, and you can have it high level, but as long as it kind of tests the intended use, more of a PQ use case kind of level. So this is one example, but that's what CSA brings to the table.
And ensuring that the people conducting the tests understand what the functionality is. So the opposite of having a 5-year-old be able to do it, the critical thinking is having someone who really understands it execute the testing.
And you kind of really uncuff the testers from that script and let them open up and, you know, drive on everything. Got it. There was one question about is CSA concept of acceptable from AME, AA, MHRA. The answer is if GAMP endorsed it, and GAMP, ISPE GAMP, and GAMP has been talking about it for over 20 plus years, why wouldn't EMEA and MHRA accept it, right? Again, we are still within the current regulations. You are still delivering your deliverables, and you're still doing your testing. Actually, you're testing more. You're just documenting less. So my question back to you, right?
And critical to that, you're still showing control, right? That's the biggie for these, right? They want you to be in control of your system.
Yep. All right. I think we can have one more question, Chris, right?
Yep, real quick.
Yes, sir. Without specific criteria for defining the leveling of risk, who takes ownership of ensuring that all medium risk really are medium and some shouldn't be high, or high risk shouldn't be really low? Lou, Joanne?
Yeah, I'll give it a correct. So when you're assessing risk, and again, you're going to have your own organization. You're going to, you know, look at the 3 elements of business, of compliance, and of technical. And what I find when it comes to software, really the business risk is always going to be the same because it's a chain. If one piece of the process doesn't work, it's not going to work. So you're not getting a lot of variant value there. Compliance risk can, you know, depending on the complexity of the system, like an ERP, there's more risk in this particular functionality. But really, if you want to differentiate on a software, it's around that technical risk. What is it that's custom code, that's heavier duty in the configuration? That's where you can get some real segregation of high to low to medium. Because if you try to assess all your functional requirements to the business risk, they're either all going to end up high, all medium, or all low. There's not a lot of variability there between the process because it is an end-to-end process. But it's the allowing that criticality to be applied to complexity of technology around, is it an integration with a new system? Because right away, that's going to be higher risk. You're going to need a lot more testing around it. And if it's custom code, you're going to need more, right? If it's heavy configuration, you're going to be maybe in that medium range, right? But you have to define it before you start sitting down with your business partners and your quality. How are we going to define high, medium, and low, right? And then apply it. And if it's not working, then move on.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, Joanne, Lou, Louie, really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaled.
Chris?
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.